Now, today, we're talking about 13th chapter. If there's one chapter, really, if there's one chapter in the Bible, that if you know of a chapter in the Bible, all right, then probably the most popular chapter in all of the Bible is Psalm 23, all right? But after that, second, if you know anything else, it will be 1 Corinthians 13. This is what's been called the love chapter, right? You know, love is patient, love is kind, that one. Because if you've been to a wedding or other things, a lot of times it's read, which it is appropriate. But to remember that most of the time, this chapter, this chapter is taken out of context. But today, you will see it in its context. You'll get and understand. In fact, this probably will be a powerful day if you listen, right? This will be a powerful day for you to understand this, because it has really put and challenged myself, because I don't know that I have ever spoken like this on this chapter after we've gone through the whole 1 Corinthians, especially not on a weekend. I've done it on a Wednesday, but not on a weekend. But it is something to understand. It's the exact opposite of what you're probably going to think. All right, so as we talk about this chapter, all right, today's title's The Bottom Line. The bottom line. I don't know about you, but there's a lot of different types of people, but my personality, I'm a bottom line kind of guy. Don't tell me the details or I will fade on you, all right? If you give me all the details of how you got there, right? But if you tell me the bottom line, you've got my attention and you've got it for a while, right? If it's the bottom line. And this is the bottom line, because that's what chapter 13 tells us. It's the bottom line, if you're his today. And that is a key phrase that I keep saying in the book of 1 Corinthians. Are you his? Because if you're his, then this chapter is one of the most important chapters in all of the scriptures. Because he talks about that it's the greatest thing as being a believer that you do and be a part of, right? So you'll see it. It's just clear. And I love going through the scriptures. I love just being able to let it speak. And if you'll hear it today, you will look down and you'll think, you know, that is what that says. That it'll be one of those days. Because we have this thought in our brain. We've heard it hundreds of times, probably. But a lot of times we lose the meaning because of the context and because of understanding anything. This particular chapter is different than all the other chapters in 1 Corinthians. I've told you so much about this 1 Corinthians book and the people at Corinth. They were truly believers, right, at Corinth. They had lots of problems. Most of the entire book is about addressing their problems, right? And the immaturity, just absolute. When I say the word immature, what I'm meaning is not physically immature and not emotionally immature, but spiritually immature. They just had not grown. Paul even told them in chapter 3, guys, you should be on solid food now, talking about spiritually as an analogy. He said, you should be on solid food now, but you're still on milk. So he's basically looking at them and saying, spiritually, guys, you haven't even made it to be a toddler yet. That's what he's telling them. That's why this whole book is very confrontive. It's right in your face. Here's what it looks like. But most of their struggles that they were having were all because of their immaturity and their lack of growing. They had constant divisions and conflict, you know, within the church, which is always a sign of immaturity, right? And he kept pointing out all their divisiveness. But when it came down to it in chapter 13, this is the bottom line. Because this is the chapter that will get rid of the division, that will cause the problems, a lot of the problems to go away. There's always going to be problems, but a lot of them to go away. It's just simply growing up. And that's why all of the chapters sound similar, they just have a different subject. But chapter 13, it's like Paul takes a break and he writes in an entirely different style. Other parts of it are confrontive, straightforward, very blunt language. But chapter 13 is written in almost verse, poetic almost in its writing, especially if you go back to the original language it was written in. Now, it's important to remember that the original language that the New Testament was written in was Greek. Greek is a great language when you understand it, its exactness. If you understand its syntax and grammar and all that, if you don't care, just listen to this part, all right? It really is straightforward. It helps you know exactly what he's talking about. It's like in our language can be a little vague at times. Like I can use the word you, Y-O-U. Now, who am I talking to? Am I talking to you individually? Or am I talking to you? All right, you see what I'm saying? It's not that way in other languages. Another thing in Greek too, it's double, sometimes triple the vocabulary. Now, here's what I need you to know. And this is real important if you want to catch this chapter, because I can't tell you how important it is, because it is the bottom line. But the word love, right, the L word, right, it's one of those words like church that takes time to explain, because most of our world has no idea what it means. Well, the world definitely doesn't know what it means. But when you think of the word love, what comes to your mind? All right, don't say it out loud, obviously. What comes to your mind? Well, in our culture, it means all kinds of things. And it can mean, romantic type, sexual type, friendship type, whatever type, And that's why I'm saying we have one word, the word love. But the Greek language has 5 words for love. See, that shows you just how exact it is. Like the word in Greek for sexual type love is eros, right? Which is where we get our word erotic from. Okay? So, and that, by the way, that word is not used in the Bible. All right? And then there's the word in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, right, is the word agape or agape, however you want to pronounce it. The old way is agape. The way that our Greek friends over in Greece would say it would be agape, right? But it's a type of love. It's the purest type of love. It's usually reserved for like God's love for us, right? And that's why he's using it. It's kind of interesting to use the word, because how can you expect people to love the way God does, right? But when you understand who you are in Christ, then you understand why that word is used for us, right? There's another word that's used in the scriptures called phileo or philos. It's brotherly type, not really so much brotherly, but family type love. That is a love that family would have for each other. In fact, the word Philadelphia, right, it's 2 Greek words. Adelphos means brother, right? Philos, phileo means love, familial type love. So when you put brother and familial, it means brotherly love. So Philadelphia is the city of brotherly love. So that's another type of love that's used. But to remember, what does this mean? Most of the time, it is quoted at weddings, and it is appropriate for weddings, because, the whole thought of what it means to be married in reality. But here's the issue, right? When you look at the scriptures, what does it mean? That word, Jeff, what does it mean when it uses and translates it just simply love in our language? That's why most people don't get this chapter. Especially, if you're all into then what is love, and what does it say to you when I mention the word love, right? And here's what I want to share with you. First of all, let me tell you what it's not. Obviously, it's not sexual, although that's what most of our world thinks of when you mention the L word. That's why I have to bring it up, right? But that's not what's being talked about here. There's also a romantic type love, it's kind of like, it's interesting. It's kind of like that command, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. So therefore, a lot of times you hear that verse quoted, that word love, and then immediately you start telling your husbands to, that you need to, bring flowers and open the door and whatever, all that stuff. But that's not what it's saying. I'm not saying you're not supposed to do those things. But what I'm saying is that's not what that verse means. It doesn't, okay? That word love, because if you want a definition, right, for the love, for the word love in chapter 13, it's sacrificial, right? It's a sacrificial thing. That is what the word means. It's like a verse, We use it every year. I was talking with Cheryl, who oversees and does our Memorial Day service. By the way, we have a great Memorial Day service coming up for you. But that one verse that says that greater love no man has, right, than a man who will give up his life for his friend, right? That's what the scriptures teach when it teaches this type of love. And guys, it's what you're looking for. That is the definition of the word here. When I say guys, I mean all of you, all right? Guys and girls. That's what you're looking for. That oogly googly feelings. Therefore, love I'm talking about is not emotional either. This is not what it's talking about in 13. Our world will tell you, even sometimes it comes out of our mouths, well, you can't, you don't choose who you love. As if it's this chemical reaction that you don't have any control over, right? That's a lie, right? You may have an emotional spasm, and you may be attracted, right? And you may be infatuated, and it may overcome your mind a little bit, but that's not the love that's being talked about here. But that's what you hear most of. You see, guys, because when it really comes down to it, love's a choice. You sacrifice. Therefore, the greatest love, the scriptures teaches, is sacrificial. That is that which is willing to give of themselves, right, for the betterment of someone else. So many of our world just doesn't get it. Well, the most well-known verse in the Bible, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. Guys, it's the message. And if you're his today, this is who he's called you to be. But if you play the world's game, you're never gonna find it. All you're gonna run into is all of this oogly googly, we were meant for each other. And then, that feeling goes away and well, if you can't choose who you fall in love with, then you can't choose who you fall out of love with. Oh my gosh. God help you if you live by that philosophy, right? Seriously. It will just be one emotional roller coaster after the next. Why? Because it's not love, right? It's one of those, right? Seriously, okay? Now, let's talk about it because there's a level here. What do you mean by sacrificial type love? Well, there's an ultimate sacrifice. We talk about that on Memorial Day. The ultimate sacrifice is to give your life. And that may happen, but probably not most of us. Most of us are not going to give up our lives for Christ, right? Or maybe for someone else. Sometimes we will. Most of us are going to be the command the scripture says, I beseech you, therefore, brothers, all right, because of God's mercy in your life, to present yourself as a living sacrifice. Guys, therefore, you have now the definition of love, if you want to know it, right? It's something that you all long for, but very few people ever experience. Now, let me ask this question. Please don't answer it out loud. And don't feel bad. We all struggle with this. But as I'm saying this, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about, well, wow, man, I would love somebody to love me like that? Or are you thinking, I need to start loving others that way? If you said the first one, you're still immature, right? If you said the second one, you're starting to get it, right? Now, don't feel bad if you're over here, right? As I've told you before, if you want to know where I get the phrase, right? There's nothing wrong with being immature. There's only something wrong with staying that way. I get it from this chapter. You'll see it. I'll get to it at the very end, all right? I just want you to know. You know, I made this statement. Have you ever wondered why? Have you ever wondered why men and women, but most of the people I know are men because of things are changing, but have you ever wonder why men who are in combat together are so close? Have you ever wondered why? Because they're put in a situation to where they have to cover for one another, sometimes sacrifice for one another, a lot of times sacrifice for one another. And there's a bond there that you cannot explain, right? And it's this love bond, right? I had a Vietnam vet come to me after the last service. He said, wow, Jeff, he said, that got to me because I served in Vietnam. I did 3 tours in Vietnam. He says, and every time we have our reunion, right? He said, we're in our mid to late 60s now. Every time we have our reunion, we get together, hug one another, and tell each other we love one another. Okay, guys, men don't do that. But there's something there you need to understand. Is that when you have been in a relationship like that, most of us long to be there, but never get there because we bought into the world's lie that it's this weird feeling you have. And it's not. And I'm not just trying to tell you that. I just want you to know the truth. Guys, it has been a passion of mine, especially through Romans we did before, now 1 Corinthians. Just go verse by verse and just let you understand what's being talked about here. And it's something totally different, and it's on a level that most people never achieve in their entire lifetime. It's sad, but true. But it's how he's called you and I to live. And the more sacrificial we can live that way, all right, the maturer we will be in our relationship with him. It is unbelievable to think about. I just want you to understand, when I mention the L word, that's what I'm talking about, right? Now again, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with the romantic part and the, and being kind and flowers and all that. I'm not talking, please don't. But remember, that's not all that there is, right? And you'll never be satisfied with it. Amazing, huh? I used to love, doing, I've told you this before, I used to love doing premarital counseling, right? And I did it. And one of the questions I would always ask is, because every once in a while I would try to have I try to have, when I do premarital counseling, I try to meet with them individually. Because sometimes you get people to talk about things when there's nobody else there, right? And so anyway, I remember, this happened lots of times, but I remember meeting with the, husband or wife, it doesn't matter which one, but, what is it that you're looking for, in your marriage? And I remember, because most of the time when you're real young, there's some immaturity there. And, and I just am looking for someone to meet all my needs. And then invariably it comes out, I just deserve to be treated like a princess, all right, or whatever. And I'm like, oh, Lord help us, I hope you grow up soon. Seriously, isn't it interesting that most people want to be treated like a princess, but they don't want to treat someone else like that? And isn't it also amazing that if you ever start treating someone like a princess, they'll start to act like a princess, right? Because that's not what you're looking for. I promise you in the end, it's going to be disappointing. Because nobody living in this world has what it takes to meet your needs, right? You got to find those, you got to get those met somewhere else. But if you want a true bond, if you want a true what you're looking for, it's not down the road you think it would be. It's this road. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. It is the bottom line. It is the bottom line. Well, I don't think so. Well, then just keep doing your plan. All right? And when you get empty down that road, then come back and see me. But if you're already there saying, hey, listen, I've been down those roads hundreds of times. There's got to be a better way. You see, that's what Jesus meant by the narrow way and the broad way. That is, you take the wide road, that's the one everybody else goes down. And they keep ending up empty, and it's like the definition of insanity, right? When they run down the road and find out it's empty, they come back at the beginning and they start over and do the same thing again, right? The narrow road, the harder one, the sacrificial one, is the road you're looking for. But boy, it doesn't look like it's right. Right? It's incredible. It's the paradox of being a believer, right? If you are his today. None of what I'm saying is going to make sense if you're not his, or at least it won't make sense in the long run. But if you're his, guys, this is who he's called us to be. All right. Now, I need to get to what I want to talk to you about today, all right? But see, I had to set that up. Now, really, we just need to read down through it. If you understand what I'm talking about when I mention the L word, then all of a sudden the chapter comes alive. You'll start saying like, gosh, that is what that says, right? That's a passion of mine. I love people to see it, all right? You may not believe it, right? You may not trust it, right? You may not even go that direction, but my job is, do you understand it? That's the key. So let's go through it. Number one, if you want to just see these, there's not that many verses, but they do say what they say. It's pretty neat, right? Number one is what I'm going to call the priority of love, right? The priority. In other words, it is what's most important, okay, in the life of those that are his. Remember, this entire book of 1 Corinthians was written to those who are his, right? Now, he goes on, and remember that this chapter is sandwiched between, chapter 13 is sandwiched between chapter 12 and 14, right? I went to school to be able to tell you stuff like that, all right? But we've already talked about chapter 12 and chapter 14, because I wanted you to see it's sandwiched in between. Why is it sandwiched in between? Well, in chapter 12, it was talking about people's giftings, those your abilities, and then spiritual gifts that God gives us, right? To be able to make a difference, you know? But what they were doing is they were showing off with them. So what is showing off? Showing off is like, everybody look at me, and I'm not going to give you my giftings if you don't notice me, right? That's called self-centered. Sacrificial is selfless, right? And as a believer, he's called us to use our gifts and abilities within the church and give them, make a difference in the lives of other people with those gifts and abilities. That's what 12 and 14 is. Guys, also, it was this chapter and this piece that really led me in parenting. I've been doing this parenting class on Wednesday nights, and we've got a couple of more weeks. But guys, this is why, other than my kids becoming believers, which was the ultimate goal, but that was up to them. But if you want to know what my goal was as a parent, is that I wanted to teach my kids to be selfless. And that's not an easy thing to do, because we're all born selfish. And we battle it all our lives. Well, I'm not selfish. Yeah, okay, but we'll talk later. But we battle it. But I have found that the freest people are the ones who live selflessly. And the most bound up, miserable people, and make everybody else miserable around them, are the ones who are the most self-centered. Isn't it interesting? So, what's he talking about here? He's saying, well, look at verse 1. Well, if I speak in the tongues of men, all right, we just talked about it all last week. There's not enough time to go over it, but it's a gift. And he also goes on to add angels. In other words, if you can look real important, right? This is what he's saying. But if you don't have love, you're just a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal. Now, you know, a gong and a cymbal within an orchestra can be a cool instrument, but by itself, obnoxious. Does that make sense? It's just noise that doesn't mean anything. This is what he's talking about. So I have these great gifts, but if I don't have love, it really makes no difference. If I have prophetic powers and I can understand all mysteries and all knowledge, which you can never do really, but let's say I can understand all those things. If I can have faith that'll remove mountains, if I don't have love, I'm not anything. So I can have those gifts, but unless I'm willing to sacrificially share them, expecting nothing in return, then what good really are they? You hear what he's saying? It's a powerful thing when you understand this chapter. It's not for the faint of heart to look at this chapter, because it calls us to a standard that without him in our lives, we can't truly ever live, right? Say I have all this cool stuff. If I don't have love, I'm not anything. So it's a priority as a believer, right? Let's say I give away all that I have, right? I just give away all that I have. Or let's say that I martyr myself, right? I deliver my body up to be burned, which was what they were doing to them, a lot of them at the time. If I don't have love, it didn't benefit me anything. You hear what he's saying? It's not about the things that you do, it's about why you do them. All right? Interesting. So if you give away everything you have, say to the poor or to people that need it, why did you do it? Because I wanted to make a difference in their life, then you're on the right page, right? If it's because I wanted the notoriety that it was going to give me or anything other motive that is self-centered, then it was for no purpose, right? Really. I found that incredible when you think on it, right? Number 2 is the definition of love. First of all, it's the priority. That's what he's telling you. I don't care what you can do. I don't care if you can stand up and you can speak in such a way that people are amazed, or you can sing in such a way that brings people to tears. For you, at least, if you don't have love, it really doesn't matter. Interesting, huh? I don't know. The more I look at this, it's life-altering when you think about it. Okay, well, then it gives you a little bit of what is it. Now, I've already kind of told you what is love, but he gives you a few others, and you'll see it all match up. Wow, that is what that says. Let's take a look at it. Verse 4. It says, love is patient and kind. Now, if you like just understanding the scriptures, right, notice that patient and kind go together. It doesn't say love is patient, comma, love is kind, comma. It says love is what? Patient and kind. So the two go together for a purpose. All right, what is patient? Usually patience, when you're impatient, it's because it's not following your timeline. Right? That's when you get impatient. Or somebody is annoying to you. Right? Immaturity, usually. And it's like, leave me alone. Just get away from me. Whatever. In other words, therefore, it's more about you, right? But when it's more about them, you'll learn patience, right? And so when you understand patience, it's just part of it. But it's pretty neat when you begin to understand it. Love is patient and kind, because you can be patient without being kind. But the two need to go together, And I've learned with that is that, there's just some immaturity there. And let's offer some grace there until they can grow, right? Interesting. I think one of the people that I loved the most in my life, who loved me the most anyway, was my grandfather, right? Grandparents are like that. But I was a strong-willed kid and was obnoxious, really. I know you're shocked. And so, but I had a grandfather who just thought I was wonderful. So patient, so kind. And you want to know why? He loved me. And he loved me at a time when I wasn't very lovable. right? And guys, that's the key. Not is somebody going to love you when you're at your best. Anybody can do that. But who's going to love you when you're on your worst day? Those are the people you want to be around. That doesn't mean go have a lot of worst day to find out who's going to love you. But it does mean that you can count on that person. That's what you're looking for, right? And that's who you want to be. If you're maturing, that's who you want to be in someone else's life, right? Patient, kind. Love does not envy or boast. Now, I think that's interesting. There's not a comma again between envy and boast. So the two go together. Well, what does it mean? What does envy mean? All right, jealousy. Well, what is jealousy? All right, when you just boil it all down to, it says that love is not jealous. What does that mean? Well, usually you're jealous of people who have something that you want. Is it fair to say that? All right, and if they don't have anything you want, then you're probably not jealous of them. Now, what they have comes in all shapes and sizes, right? They may have a talent, right? They may have possessions or money or different giftings or, everything seems to go great for them, and they're a lot bigger jerk than I am or that kind of stuff, And so jealousy then is comparison. And it's always self-centered, right? You cannot have jealousy and not be self-centered. I know that's hard to hear, but again, when I come to this, I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad. Guys, remember, we're all in the boat, all right? We're all battling, all right? It all being about me, right? It's a battle we all have. Even believers, even maturer believers. It always creeps back in, right? In fact, when I get away from the Lord, if I stop spending time with him, whatever, first way I know that I've gotten away from him is I start to get selfish. I start wanting the things that I want when I want them. Anybody know what I'm talking about? But when I'm closest to him, I'm not saying I don't have that trouble, but I have a little more power over it, if that makes sense. So what we're talking about here is something that is really supernatural. That's why I don't ever try to put this load on someone who's not his, because in reality, where are you going to find the strength to live this way? It's a powerful thing to think of. So envy, being jealous of what someone else has. Why does boast with it? Well, boasting tries to make somebody jealous of what you have, right? Boasting usually comes from very insecure people that really want to feel superior to others, and they try to make people feel inferior. That's what boasting is, right? If you're content and satisfied, then why boast? All right, why brag? There's no reason to. It's all built out of, right, self-centeredness. That doesn't mean we don't all struggle with it, right? And it's so funny because in reality, the world around you won't call it boasting, or look at the next one, is not arrogant or rude. They go similar, they're similar. You'll find out how rude goes with arrogance in just a second. But what is he talking about? Well, see the word arrogant in there? You see the word boast. Mostly our world will tell you that's the definition of self-confidence. But in reality, we're teaching kids and everyone to be this way. But in reality, it's not what you're looking for, I promise, right? What does it mean by arrogant or rude? Well, what is rude? Well, I looked up the original word, and rude's not a bad, description, but here's what rude means. Rude is trying to humiliate, right? Or to embarrass someone to their detriment. I just want you, those of you who have ears to hear, I want you to hear it. It's just another version of self-centered. You're never rude to someone, right? That it's not a self-centered move, right? Interesting, huh? Our world gets through these, sitcoms and people, and we try to mimic some of their sayings and gotchas, And it may sound funny, but you're definitely not winning friends and influencing people. All right? Sometimes just the sheer rudeness just shows an immaturity of a preoccupation with yourself, right? Look at the next one. It does not insist in having its own way. That's a tough one to hear, right? Gosh, most battles are about who gets to do what they want to do, right? Interesting. Got to move on, right? It's not irritable or resentful. It doesn't rejoice at wrongdoing. What does that mean? Oh. If you're happy somebody messes up, understand? If you're happy when they fail, this is what we're talking about. Because this rejoices in wrongdoing or rejoicing in failure is basically real kin to envy and jealousy, right? Yeah. Just makes me feel better when they screw up, or whatever. That's not what love is. Why? Because love is not so much concerned about self, but it pains your heart when somebody goes down that road, right? It's an incredible thing. There's no ability to live that way other than through him, right? Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures, perseveres. This is the whole thought about love somebody on their worst day as opposed to just always on their best day. Yeah. It's a powerful thing. There's more to that, but I just wanted you to see it. But you haven't listened, right, fast enough. So we've got to move on and finish. But there's a whole end to this that I want to do just in the next 3 or 4 minutes. And it's the last one, all right? And here it is. Just so, because I want you to understand the chapter. So you understand the priority, you understand, right, the definition. But I've called this one the permanence, right? But what we're talking about here will follow you into eternity according to this passage. Let's read it quickly, all right? It says that love never ends. That doesn't mean that if you have true love, it never ends with somebody. What it's saying is that this is one of those things that doesn't have an ending, right? You'll see what I mean in just a minute. In other words, he gives you some examples. He says, see, most people, love never ends. In other words, that's why, forever love. You don't get it, all right? But you will get it if you just look at it, all right? It says, as for prophecies. Now, what's a prophecy? A prophecy is about things that are going to happen or they're truth about God's word. It says that there's going to be no need for them one day, right? As for tongues, that is languages, the ability to speak in other languages, there's going to come a day, they'll cease. There's going to be no reason for them. Knowledge, well, once you already know everything, there's no reason for knowledge anymore, right? It's going to pass away. That is the need for it. It says, for now, we know in part, right? That is just a small piece. Things that we can know are just a small piece. He goes on to say, prophesy, that is God's word, we only know a piece. But when the perfect comes, and when's that coming? Well, if you're his, obviously it'll come when sin's done away with, right? And we'll be like him, the scripture says, because we'll see him as he really is. Interesting. The partial will pass away. That is all this temporary stuff that most people live their entire lives for, is the temporary fix, the temporary thrill, right? That's all going to be gone. There's going to be no need for that. Because when I was a child, Paul said, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I gave up childish things. This is where I got the phrase, there's nothing wrong with being immature. There's only something wrong with staying that way. Because our culture almost wants you to stay a child, right? They almost, I've seen so many movies, just continue to be a child at heart. Well, if you want to stay immature, then go for it. But remember, that's not who he's called us to be. He's called us to grow. For now we see, but in a mirror dimly. That is a fascinating word. I don't have enough time to tell you about it. But let me tell you real quickly. Basically what it means, it's like looking in a mirror when it's dimly lit. Right? And back at this time, the mirrors weren't that good anyway. So if you've ever been in a room, right, where it's dimly lit, and you look in a mirror and you move around a little bit and you can like see a little bit, but only little pieces. So for now, we see in a mirror dimly, but that day when it comes, it'll be face to face. Now I have knowledge partially, but one day it's coming, I'm going to know fully, even as he's known me fully. And then he tells you the big one. Now, faith, hope, and love. Those are the three things that will endure, right? They're going to follow you. Everything else is temporary, right? Amassing things, getting to do things. It's all temporary, and it's all going to pass away. But these three things, they're going to follow you into eternity, if you will. Faith, hope, and love. But remember, the greatest of all of it is love. Right? Guys, this is the standard he's called us to. If you're his, right? I'm not trying to put a heavy load on people who aren't his, but if you're his today, this is who he's called us to be, right? And it's an incredible thing when you begin to see what he's talking about. And it's much different than, how I love you, let me count the ways. All right? Down to the point to where what you're looking for. It's what you're looking for. And you'll find a little bit of it in being loved that way. But you'll find a whole lot more of it when you love someone else that way. That is the powerful part. But most people don't see it because you'll never see it if it's always about you.